Sid Eudy was one of wrestling's most intimidating giants, whose unhinged character and explosive power moves made him a two-time champion in both WWE and WCW. However, in 1993, a brutal hotel room fight left Arn Anderson stabbed with scissors and Sid himself bleeding from multiple wounds, forever altering his career trajectory. This shocking, violent incident is just one piece of the puzzle in understanding Sid Eudy, the legend who WWE has mysteriously blackballed from the Hall of Fame. In 1960, Sidney Raymond Eudy entered the world in rural Arkansas. Those early years shaped not just the man, but the monster who would later dominate wrestling rings across America. Growing up on an Arkansas farm forged Sid through physical labor. Day after day, farm life sculpted his frame naturally. He hauled, lifted, and worked from sunrise to sunset, building what would become one of wrestling's most impressive physiques through practical work rather than through gyms or trainers. By adulthood, Sid towered at 6'9", the kind of height that commands attention wherever you go. But what makes Sid's story truly fascinating is how dramatically different his path was from most wrestling superstars of his era. While future legends like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart grew up idolizing wrestlers and dreaming of the ring, Sid had absolutely no interest in professional wrestling. None. Zero. For most of his early adult life, becoming a wrestler never crossed his mind. He didn't collect wrestling figures, didn't watch matches on TV, didn't practice moves with his friends. Wrestling simply wasn't on his radar. This complete indifference makes the story of his wrestling discovery all the more remarkable. According to Sid himself, he was just working out at a local gym when fate stepped in, wearing neon fringe and sunglasses. The legendary Macho Man Randy Savage spotted him across the weight room, approached this imposing figure, and asked point-blank if he'd ever considered wrestling professionally. But wrestling stories often come with contradictions, and this origin tale is no exception. Lanny Poffo, Randy Savage's brother, remembers a completely different scenario. In Poffo's version, Sid actively sought out his opportunity, approaching Poffo at a Memphis wrestling show and directly asking how to break into the business. Two entirely different accounts of the same pivotal moment. Was Sid discovered while minding his own business, or did he deliberately seek his opportunity? We may never know the truth, but what's clear is that Sid's entry into wrestling wasn't driven by passion or childhood dreams. His motivation was purely practical. When his wife became pregnant, Sid needed steady income, and he needed it quickly. As he bluntly put it, "My wife got pregnant, and it sounded like I could get into that making more a little bit faster. No romantic notions about artistic expression. Just a tall guy with bills to pay and a baby on the way." This pragmatic approach distinguished Sid from the beginning. While many wrestlers speak of sacrificing everything for their love of the business, Sid viewed wrestling exactly as it was: a job. A way to provide for his family that happened to pay better than his alternatives. That doesn't mean he didn't work hard. Early footage shows a raw but captivating presence. During one of his first televised matches in Continental Championship Wrestling, Sid manhandled his opponent with such convincing power that fans at ringside visibly recoiled. Even as a rookie, he moved with an athleticism that belied his massive frame. Opponents looked genuinely intimidated, and for good reason. His natural gifts allowed rapid progression despite his late start. While other newcomers struggled for years in obscurity, promoters immediately recognized Sid's potential. That imposing presence and natural athleticism couldn't be taught, and you can almost see the wheels turning in promoters' minds as they watched his early matches. His quick rise created resentment among wrestlers who had paid their dues through years of low-paying matches. But Sid wasn't concerned with the traditional path or pleasing the locker room. He focused on maximizing his earning potential in the shortest time possible. This business-first mentality defined Sid's entire career. While others became entangled in creative politics, Sid consistently made decisions based on one factor: which option would put the most money in his pocket. In an industry notorious for exploiting performers, Sid's approach was refreshingly self-protective. He understood his value in a business where size and presence were premium commodities. If a promotion wasn't offering what he felt he was worth, he walked away, displaying rare leverage in a business where most wrestlers feared unemployment above all. The irony? Sid's lack of childhood wrestling fandom became his greatest asset. Without rose-colored glasses, he saw the business clearly for what it was: a business. He wasn't blinded by glory or trapped by dreams of legacy. He was there to get paid, and this clarity guided every career decision. This mindset helped him navigate the cutthroat wrestling world effectively. While many peers ended up broken, Sid's pragmatism protected both his finances and physical well-being. He knew when to push for more and when to walk away. His rapid ascent is remarkable considering his complete lack of passion for wrestling. While technical wizards like Bret Hart spent decades perfecting their craft, Sid reached comparable success with raw presence and business savvy alone. In less than 2 years from his debut, he commanded a major promotion salary most veterans only dreamed of. Throughout his career, this practical approach led to both his greatest successes and most controversial moments. Sid never pretended to be what he wasn't, a wrestling purist or a company man. He was a businessman in a business often pretending to be something else. For a man with no wrestling passion, Sid's first character required him to become completely unrecognizable. Continental Championship Wrestling didn't introduce the world to Sid Eudy. They unleashed Lord Humongous, a hockey-masked monster straight from apocalyptic cinema. This inspired choice to hide their physically impressive new talent behind a mask was wrestling genius at its most practical. When Sid stepped into the ring as Lord Humongous in 1987, few realized they were witnessing the birth of a future world champion. The character, shamelessly stolen from the film Mad Max 2. The Road Warrior featured Sid in a hockey mask, studded leather outfit, and carrying a chain. This mask became a veil that concealed both his identity and his vulnerabilities, allowing his imposing physicality to speak where his experience couldn't. The brilliance of the Lord Humongous gimmick was twofold. First, it completely concealed Sid's identity, allowing him to make rookie mistakes without damaging his future marketability. Second, it capitalized on his intimidating physical attributes while minimizing the need for technical wrestling proficiency. Fans didn't expect a complex wrestling match from a post-apocalyptic madman. They wanted destruction. Behind that mask, something remarkable was happening. Despite his raw inexperience, Sid was already displaying the physical presence that would define his career. His movements were limited but impactful. His offense was basic but believable. Most importantly, even beneath layers of costume, you couldn't hide that imposing 6'9" frame that moved with surprising athleticism for someone so large. The Lord Humongous character worked because it emphasized Sid's natural strengths. The mask and minimal speaking requirements focused audience attention entirely on his intimidating presence. He wasn't expected to deliver technical masterpieces. He was there to dominate. This formula of presence over technique would become the blueprint for his entire career. Continental Championship Wrestling operated primarily in Alabama and the surrounding Southern Territories, far from the national spotlight of WWF or even the regional power of Jim Crockett Promotions. This smaller territory provided the ideal environment for Sid to develop his skills away from mainstream scrutiny. Here, he could work matches against experienced veterans who could guide him through the fundamentals while teaching him how to maximize his obvious physical gifts. Sid's development took an unexpected international turn when he toured with New Japan Pro Wrestling as Vicious Warrior. This overseas excursion transformed his trajectory, as New Japan specifically groomed him to be the next Bruiser Brody, one of the most feared and respected gaijin, foreign wrestlers in Japanese history. The Bruiser Brody comparison was no accident. Brody had built his legendary status through his wild, brawling style and intimidating presence rather than technical wrestling excellence. This blueprint provided the perfect developmental path for Sid, reinforcing that his imposing size and menacing demeanor could be more valuable than complex wrestling maneuvers. These international tours forged crucial dimensions in Sid's arsenal. Japanese wrestling's stiffer style hardened his strikes, adding credibility to his offense. The grueling tour schedule built his conditioning and durability. Most significantly, exposure to Japanese psychology taught him how to maximize impact with minimal movement. A lesson that would pay dividends throughout his career as he moved between American promotions with different stylistic expectations. Back in America, Sid evolved into Sid Vicious in World-Class Championship Wrestling, borrowing from the infamous Sex Pistols bassist. This name change marked his emergence from behind the mask, developing a character with an edge of unpredictability and danger that matched his intimidating look. The Sid Vicious identity accomplished something crucial. It provided a persona that could travel between promotions and territories. Unlike Lord Humongous, which was tied to a specific visual presentation, Sid Vicious could evolve and adapt. This flexibility would prove valuable as Sid navigated between major promotions throughout his career. These early character iterations established the template that would carry Sid to multiple world championships. From Lord Humongous to Vicious Warrior to Sid Vicious, each character emphasized intimidation and power. His formative experiences across different territories and countries taught Sid exactly where his value lay in the wrestling industry. These smaller territories served as the perfect incubator for Sid's developing persona. Unlike today's wrestlers who often debut on national television with minimal experience, Sid benefited from this more traditional path. Continental Championship Wrestling and his international tours kept him hidden from mainstream audiences while he learned his craft, preventing fans from witnessing his inevitable rookie mistakes. This strategic development was far from accidental. Wrestling promoters have long understood that giants require special handling. For every Undertaker who succeeds on the biggest stage, countless other big men fail because they're exposed too early. By keeping Sid in smaller territories and behind masks, promoters protected their investment while giving him time to develop the fundamentals. The wrestling business has always excelled at maximizing assets. In Sid, they had a physical specimen with natural charisma and intimidating presence, but limited technical ability and experience. The solution? Create characters that emphasized his strengths and masked his weaknesses. Lord Humongous couldn't execute a perfect armbar, but he didn't need to. He just needed to look terrifying and hit hard. By the time Sid was ready for national exposure, he had internalized the most important lesson for someone of his size. Wrestling didn't need to be complex to be effective. His early characters had taught him that presence, intensity, and a few devastating power moves could carry him further than technical excellence ever would. This formula would propel him to championship glory across his career. National exposure was calling, and in 1989, Sid answered by joining WCW as one half of the Skyscrapers, a tag team so physically imposing that promoters practically salivated at their potential. Standing nearly 7 feet tall alongside Dan Spivey, the duo created an instant visual impact that few tag teams in wrestling history could match. When these twin towers entered the ring, announcers would frantically emphasize their combined height of almost 14 feet, making them look like giants compared to most of their opponents. The Skyscrapers demolished jobbers with ruthless efficiency, showcasing their raw power and intimidation factor. Television audiences quickly took notice of these behemoths, who tossed grown men around the ring like rag dolls. With their matching black tights and boots, they presented a unified front of destruction that positioned them for a major push up the card. WCW executives capitalized on their towering presence. In an era where size reigned supreme, they had secured two massive specimens who could credibly challenge any team in the company. Their push followed a calculated blueprint. Squash matches built their credibility while protecting them from potential in-ring weaknesses. For Sid specifically, this partnership provided the perfect vehicle to showcase his intimidating presence without exposing his limited experience. The Skyscrapers' impressive foundation began to crumble during a high-profile match against the Steiner brothers at the November 1989 Clash of the Champions event. Sid suffered a punctured lung and broken rib, legitimate injuries that immediately halted the team's momentum and sidelined him when championship gold seemed inevitable. During his recovery period, a career-defining pattern emerged. Rumors circulated that Sid had been spotted playing softball, his true passion, while supposedly too injured to perform in the ring. This information reached WCW management, particularly Booker Ole Anderson, who viewed this behavior as a cardinal sin against wrestling's unwritten code of paying dues. The consequences materialized when Sid returned 7 months later. Like a skyscraper suddenly missing its structural support, his carefully constructed character came crashing down. In what many insiders considered deliberate punishment, Sid was booked to lose to Lex Luger in a shocking 26 seconds. For a performer of Sid's stature and previous push, this kind of squash match was practically unheard of. Big men in wrestling were typically protected at all costs. The message from management was clear. Softball might be your passion, but wrestling pays your bills, and disrespect won't be tolerated. Despite this humbling return, Sid's commanding presence proved too valuable to ignore in the star-hungry wrestling landscape of 1990. In one of wrestling's most unexpected developments, Sid found himself inducted into the prestigious Four Horsemen faction, widely considered wrestling's most elite stable. Alongside the legendary Ric Flair, Sid served as the group's intimidating enforcer, a role that elevated his status virtually overnight. Joining the Four Horsemen was comparable to a rookie basketball player being drafted directly onto the Dream Team. This faction represented excellence in professional wrestling, typically reserved for the most talented performers in the business. Sid's inclusion spoke volumes about how management viewed his potential despite the softball incident. Under the Horsemen's banner, Sid's profile rose dramatically. The association with Flair, arguably the greatest wrestler of all time, gave him instant credibility, while the stable's heel alignment perfectly suited his intimidating demeanor. This connection culminated in a main event match against Sting for the World Heavyweight Championship at Halloween Havoc 1990, representing Sid's first significant singles push on a major stage. Though he didn't capture the championship that night, Sid's position seemed secure. As a member of wrestling's most prestigious faction, working main events against the company's top star, conventional wisdom suggested Sid was being groomed for a long-term position near the top of the card. The foundation was being laid for what should have been a lucrative, stable career in a major promotion. Yet behind the scenes, the business-minded Sid was already looking at other options. Despite his strong position in the Four Horsemen, he had begun negotiating with WWF, WCW's larger competitor. When presented with more lucrative financial terms and promises of main event positioning, Sid made a decision that reflected his pragmatic approach to the business. He chose the bigger payday and the bigger stage, walking away from what many wrestlers would consider a dream position alongside Flair. This decision perfectly illustrated the fundamental difference between Sid and many of his peers. While countless wrestlers would have sacrificed short-term financial gain for the prestige of remaining with the Horsemen, Sid's approach remained consistent with how he entered the business, as a financial opportunity rather than a lifelong passion. When a better opportunity presented itself, loyalty to WCW or the Horsemen faction meant little compared to securing his financial future. For WCW executives who had invested in building Sid's character and position, his departure represented a significant loss. They had pushed him into one of the company's most prestigious spots only to watch him walk away for competitor money. This pattern of choosing immediate financial gain over long-term position building would become a hallmark of Sid's career approach, for better or worse. Looking back, this early WCW run established the blueprint for Sid's entire career trajectory. He would repeatedly reach heights that seemed to position him for long-term main event success, only for circumstances, sometimes self-inflicted, sometimes not, to interrupt that momentum. The meteoric rise followed by unexpected departure would become a recurring theme across his wrestling journey. When Vince McMahon needed a physically imposing hero to stand alongside Hulk Hogan in the summer of 1991, he turned to the most unlikely candidate imaginable, a 6'9" monster who looked like he'd sooner eat children than protect them. The WWF wasted no time transforming Sid Eudy into Sid Justice, with the name itself promising fairness while his towering frame promised anything but. This jarring character pivot would kick off one of wrestling's strangest career chapters, setting Sid on a trajectory that would lead from referee to WrestleMania main eventer to softball enthusiast. Sid made his WWF debut in spectacular fashion, serving as the special referee at SummerSlam 1991. Standing between Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior as they faced off against the Triangle of Terror, Sergeant Slaughter, Colonel Mustafa, and General Adnan, Sid instantly established himself as a physically dominant force, aligned with the promotion's top heroes. The crowd responded positively, but something felt off about this arrangement from day one. Everything about Sid screamed villain. His imposing size, intimidating gaze, and barely contained aggression contradicted his role as a smiling, rule-enforcing good guy. The WWF might as well have tried turning Freddy Krueger into a kindergarten teacher. Wrestling audiences can suspend their disbelief for many things: undead morticians, snake handlers, and garbage men turned wrestlers. But a menacing giant playing against type-stretched credibility to its breaking point. The 1992 Royal Rumble provided the perfect opportunity to course-correct. During the climactic moments, Sid eliminated the beloved Hulk Hogan, leading to a memorable confrontation that set up his long-overdue heel turn. The crowd's reaction told the story. This was the role Sid was born to play. The elimination felt natural because audiences already sensed the villain lurking beneath the hero's veneer. This heel turn led directly to one of the most controversial booking decisions of the early 1990s. The original plan for WrestleMania 8 had been a dream match between Hulk Hogan and the newly arrived Ric Flair, a confrontation fans had anticipated for years. Instead, the WWF pivoted to Hogan versus Sid Justice in the main event, a decision that left many fans disappointed before the match even happened. While Sid was physically impressive and generated solid heat as a villain, he simply wasn't Ric Flair. Wrestling fans who had waited years for the Hogan-Flair showdown on the grandest stage felt shortchanged. Through no fault of his own, Sid was positioned as the disappointing alternative to the match everyone actually wanted to see. When WrestleMania 8 finally arrived on April 5, 1992, at the Hoosier Dome in Indianapolis, the Hogan-Sid main event was already fighting an uphill battle. Would the match deliver enough action to overcome the pre-show disappointment? Could Sid cement himself as a worthy WrestleMania headliner? The match itself was serviceable if unspectacular. Exactly what you'd expect from a Hulk Hogan match of the era, with plenty of power moves but limited technical wrestling. But what about the finish? After Hogan hit his signature leg drop finisher, Sid kicked out at the last possible moment, 2.9 seconds into the count. The problem? The referee counted to 3 anyway, creating a botched finish that left everyone confused. Fans in the arena could clearly see Sid's shoulder up before the 3 count, but the match was called in Hogan's favor regardless. The botched finish created an awkward moment that perfectly encapsulated Sid's run in the company, something that should have worked on paper but somehow went sideways in execution. Behind the scenes, the situation was even messier. Around WrestleMania time, Sid had failed a drug test under the company's substance abuse policy, adding another complication to his already troubled run. In a decision that revealed much about the WWF's selective enforcement of its own policies, the company allowed Sid to work both WrestleMania and the subsequent European tour before serving his suspension. This arrangement highlights how differently the rules were applied to main event talent versus mid-card performers, especially during this era. What happened next would establish Sid's reputation for making unexpected career decisions. Rather than serve his suspension and return to what was still a prominent position in the company, Sid quit the WWF altogether. His reason? Softball. In one of wrestling's most unusual career priorities, Sid chose returning to his recreational softball league over continuing his main event run in the world's largest wrestling promotion. This decision seems incomprehensible to most wrestling fans who couldn't imagine anyone walking away from a WrestleMania main event position to play amateur sports. But for Sid, who had always viewed wrestling primarily as a money-making venture rather than a passion, the decision made perfect sense. The softball decision perfectly illustrated the fundamental difference between Sid and most of his colleagues. While other wrestlers would sacrifice everything for a main event spot, Sid repeatedly demonstrated that wrestling was simply a job to him, one he was willing to walk away from when it no longer suited his lifestyle or priorities. What makes this career detour even more remarkable is that Sid was scheduled to enter a significant program with the Ultimate Warrior upon his return from suspension. This wasn't a case of a wrestler being pushed down the card. Sid was walking away from a guaranteed high-profile position that most wrestlers would have killed for. In interviews years later, Sid would attribute his departure to multiple factors beyond just softball. He expressed frustration with the direction of his character and acknowledged that the failed drug test had complicated his standing in the company. But regardless of the full reasoning, the abrupt nature of his exit became yet another chapter in his increasingly unpredictable career narrative. While softball might seem like the strangest chapter in Sid's career, it pales in comparison to what happened in a Blackburn, England hotel room in 1993. 24 stab wounds, 2 bleeding wrestlers, and a championship opportunity that would vanish in a pool of blood. The infamous scissors incident became the night Sid Eudy nearly became a murderer. After his abrupt WWF departure, Sid found himself back in WCW in 1993. This time, he arrived with a new presentation as the mystery client of flamboyant manager Colonel Robert Parker. The promotion quickly paired him with the monstrous Vader to form one of wrestling's most physically intimidating tag teams, the aptly named Masters of the Powerbomb. With 2 of wrestling's most imposing figures destroying opponents with devastating powerbombs, WCW seemed to have a winning formula on their hands. Behind the scenes, the company had even bigger plans for Sid. Television tapings had already recorded promotional footage showing Sid as the World Heavyweight Champion, strongly indicating that WCW was positioning him to defeat Vader for the title at their biggest event of the year, Starrcade 1993. After years of starting and stopping pushes across multiple companies, Sid was finally on the verge of a sustained run at the very top of a major promotion. But everything would unravel during a seemingly routine European tour in October 1993. The evening started innocently enough at the hotel bar where the wrestlers were staying. 2 Cold Scorpio, who witnessed the events, later recounted how Sid and respected veteran Arn Anderson began discussing WCW's direction. Sid was saying how the company needed to push the big guys more, Scorpio recalled. Arn was defending the old-school workers who could actually wrestle. As the night wore on and alcohol flowed, the conversation grew increasingly heated. What started as professional disagreement turned personal. "You're just jealous they're grooming me for the title," Sid reportedly sneered. "You'll never be half the worker some of us are," Anderson fired back. When other wrestlers couldn't defuse the tension, both men eventually returned to their separate hotel rooms. The argument should have ended there. It didn't. According to multiple accounts, Sid later approached Anderson's room, pounding on the door. "We're not done talking," he shouted through the door. When Anderson opened it, the verbal confrontation quickly escalated. "I heard shouting, then crashes, then screaming," one wrestler who requested anonymity told reporters later. "By the time we got there, there was blood everywhere." Hotel room scissors, the kind typically found alongside the stationary and complementary pens, became weapons in one of wrestling's most notorious real-life fights. In the chaotic struggle that followed, Anderson suffered approximately 20 stab wounds, while Sid himself was stabbed 4 times. The hotel hallway became a bloody crime scene as other wrestlers and road agents rushed to separate the men. Medical personnel were called immediately, and both required hospital treatment. According to those present, if the fight hadn't been broken up when it was, the outcome could have been fatal. WCW executives faced an immediate crisis. The company was in the middle of an international tour with 2 top stars now hospitalized. Their initial response was attempting to keep the incident quiet, difficult in wrestling's gossip-heavy culture. Word spread quickly through the locker room. According to wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer's reporting, many wrestlers threatened to walk out if Sid wasn't immediately fired. The scissors incident had crossed a line that even the often lawless wrestling business couldn't ignore. Neither Sid nor Anderson wanted to remain in England for the 90-day period required for a full criminal investigation. With both parties unwilling to press charges and eager to return to the United States for medical treatment, no criminal prosecution took place. The incident remained strictly a matter for WCW's internal discipline. The company made their decision. Sid was released from his contract. His planned championship victory at Starrcade 1993 was scrapped, along with all promotional materials showing him as champion. In a business where difficult backstage behavior was often tolerated if you drew money, Sid had finally gone too far. For Anderson, though seriously injured, the path forward was clearer. As a respected veteran with close ties to many influential figures in the company, he would eventually return to his role in WCW after recovering. His reputation as a level-headed professional likely led many to assume Sid was the primary aggressor. What makes the scissors incident so significant in wrestling lore is how it represents a genuine career derailment. Wrestling history is filled with backstage fights that became part of a performer's mythology without significantly altering their career trajectory. But for Sid, this was different. In a single night, he went from being positioned as the next world champion to unemployable by a major promotion. The timing couldn't have been worse. WCW was entering a period of creative renaissance under Eric Bischoff's leadership, and the World Championship opportunity would have positioned Sid at the center of this new era. Instead, he spent the next 2 years working in smaller promotions like the USWA, rebuilding his reputation and waiting for the major companies to call again. Perhaps most tragically, the scissors incident cemented a perception of Sid that had been building throughout his career. That for all his physical gifts and charisma, he was ultimately too unpredictable and volatile to be trusted with a company's top position. While his imposing size and look had repeatedly earned him second and third chances despite earlier controversies, the extreme nature of the scissors incident tested the limits of wrestling's notorious forgiveness for marketable talent. 2 years after the bloody scissors incident, the wrestling world witnessed something that defied all conventional career logic. Sid Eudy, the man who had been fired for one of the most violent backstage altercations in history, was suddenly back on WWF television in 1995 as Sycho Sid. Even more surprising? He wasn't languishing in the undercard. He was immediately positioned as the imposing bodyguard for then WWF champion Shawn Michaels, one of the company's biggest stars. The wrestling business has always operated under its own strange moral code, but Sid's return exposed its most fundamental truth. Box office appeal trumps everything, even personal animosity. According to former WWF writer Bruce Pritchard, Vince personally couldn't stand Sid, but he knew money when he saw it. World Wrestling Federation was hemorrhaging top talent to rival World Championship Wrestling, which had deeper pockets thanks to Ted Turner's backing. With stars like Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and others jumping ship, McMahon needed established names who could connect with audiences immediately. The Sycho prefix added to Sid's name was a deliberate acknowledgement of his reputation. WWF leaned into his volatile history, presenting him as an unpredictable force of nature. His entrance music began with a haunting scream, setting the perfect tone for a character perpetually on the edge of violence. McMahon reportedly told Sid directly, "We're selling what people already believe about you." Initially, the partnership between Michaels and Sid worked smoothly. The visual contrast was striking. The 6'9" powerhouse standing guard over the comparatively smaller showstopper. During their matches against tag teams like Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith, Sid's devastating powerbombs would bring crowds to their feet. But wrestling storylines demand betrayal, and the inevitable turn came when Sid attacked Michaels after a frustrating tag match loss, establishing himself as one of the company's premier villains overnight. This heel turn led to a main event program against WWF champion Diesel, Kevin Nash, in early 1995. Their in-your-house showdown showcased Sid's strengths, his intimidating presence and powerful offense, while protecting him from lengthy matches that might expose his limitations. Yet despite the strong initial push, the program with Diesel fizzled. Within months, Sid found himself drifting down the card, working with mid-level talent instead of main eventers. By early 1996, Sid was once again gone from WWF television. Unlike his previous departures, this exit wasn't marked by controversy or softball leagues. It was simply a matter of creative direction running dry. With little for him to do, Sid did something almost unthinkable for someone who had main-evented WrestleMania just a few years earlier. He retired from wrestling and returned to regular blue-collar work. For a brief period, it seemed Sid had genuinely moved on from the wrestling business. He found stable employment away from the spotlight, the chaotic travel schedule, and the politics of the locker room. But wrestling retirements rarely stick, especially when opportunity comes knocking. That opportunity emerged from an unexpected source. the Ultimate Warrior's abrupt second departure from the WWF. Warrior, who had returned at WrestleMania 12 in 1996, quickly found himself at odds with management again and left the company by June. This sudden exit created a massive hole in WWF's roster during a time when WCW was dominating the Monday Night Ratings war. McMahon, ever the pragmatist, reached out to Sid once more. The offer was too good to refuse: a significant push, prominent television time, and a salary that reflected his drawing power. By July 1996, Sid was back on WWF programming, loudly proclaiming himself the master and ruler of the world while powerbombing opponents through tables. This third chance with the company represented something unprecedented in Sid's career: a genuine opportunity for sustained success at the highest level. Having returned with newfound focus and determination, Sid connected with audiences in ways he hadn't before. His simple yet effective power moves and intense, sometimes unhinged promos made him a compelling character during the transitional period between WWF's family-friendly New Generation era and the edgier Attitude Era that was beginning to take shape. The culmination of this unlikely comeback came at Survivor Series 1996, when Sid defeated Shawn Michaels to capture the WWF Championship, his first world title in a major promotion. The Madison Square Garden crowd erupted as Sid planted Michaels with a powerbomb and secured the 3 count. Their match featured a dramatic moment when Sid countered Michaels' aerial attack with raw power, symbolizing how brute strength could overcome technical skill. After nearly a decade in the business, multiple controversial exits, and the infamous scissors incident that should have blacklisted him forever, Sid Eudy had finally reached wrestling's pinnacle. This championship victory represented the wrestling industry's contradictory value system in its purest form. A man who had burned bridges in spectacular fashion, who openly admitted he saw wrestling merely as a paycheck rather than a passion, who had literally stabbed a respected locker room leader, was now the face of the world's largest wrestling company. The message couldn't have been clearer. In professional wrestling, marketability outweighs all other considerations, even morality. Sid's triumph also exposed an uncomfortable reality about wrestling's power structure. While wrestlers themselves face strict codes of loyalty and are expected to pay dues, promoters operate under no such restrictions. They'll welcome back almost anyone, regardless of past transgressions, if they believe that person can sell tickets or boost ratings. The same McMahon, who reportedly disliked Sid personally, had no qualms about placing the company's most prestigious title around his waist when business demanded it. The championship reign legitimized Sid in ways his impressive physique and intimidating presence alone never could. He was now officially recognized as a performer who could carry a company even if just temporarily. For a man who entered the business relatively late and approached it pragmatically, this validation must have been particularly satisfying. Holding that prestigious WWF Championship should have cemented Sid as an all-time great. But here's the strangest part. A man with 4 world titles across 2 major promotions barely registers in conversations about wrestling legends. How could someone with championship credentials matching Hogan and Flair somehow fade into wrestling's second tier? The answer reveals wrestling's harsh truth. Timing is everything. When Sid claimed the WWF Championship at Survivor Series 1996, he embraced a new character evolution. The master and ruler of the world persona capitalized on his intimidating presence, giving fans a dominant champion whose physical stature made his title reign believable. Standing in the ring with his arms raised, championship gold wrapped around his waist, Sid finally had the validation that had eluded him for years. Fans initially responded with genuine enthusiasm, chanting his name as he posed with his newly won gold. But a strange phenomenon was occurring in arenas across America. Despite Sid standing tall as the company's champion, the crowd's attention was increasingly drawn to a brewing feud between Bret the Hitman Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Their collision at WrestleMania 13 would become one of wrestling's most influential matches, setting the stage for the Attitude Era that would revolutionize the business. Sid, despite being champion, found himself caught in the undertow of wrestling's changing tides. This unfortunate timing haunted his entire championship career. While Sid was establishing himself as a credible main event champion, the wrestling landscape shifted beneath his feet, Audiences evolved too, moving beyond their fascination with larger-than-life monsters who dominated opponents. Wrestling fans now demanded complexity, shades of gray, and character depth that Sid's straightforward power persona wasn't built to provide. Early 1997 brought the infamously known Lost Smile incident. Shawn Michaels appeared on Raw to announce he was vacating the WWF Championship he'd won from Sid, claiming a career-threatening knee injury. The circumstances surrounding this decision have been debated for decades. Was Michaels legitimately injured, or unwilling to lose the title to Undertaker at WrestleMania? This unexpected development created a power vacuum leading directly to Sid's second WWF Championship reign in February 1997, when he defeated Bret Hart to reclaim the title. On paper, this solidified his legacy. A two-time WWF champion who'd beaten both Michaels and Hart, two of the most respected technical wrestlers in history. Yet, as Sid celebrated his second coronation, veteran fans could sense the company's creative direction shifting away from his style of performer. This second reign lasted just over a month before culminating at WrestleMania 13 against The Undertaker. The match itself was solid, with Sid's power contrasting against Undertaker's methodical style. But again, Sid's moment was overshadowed. The same event featured the iconic Hart vs. Austin submission match that stole the show and redirected the company's creative trajectory. Sid became the streak's sixth victim, yet few remember this compared to the blood-soaked image of Steve Austin screaming in the sharpshooter. After departing WWF, Sid disappeared from major wrestling promotions for nearly 2 years. His 1999 return came with a repackaged identity as WCW's Millennium Man. This character attempted to capitalize on Y2K anxieties while borrowing from Bill Goldberg's undefeated streak formula. While fans initially popped for his return, the excitement quickly faded as WCW's creative confusion became apparent. WCW in 1999 showed serious signs of decline, with frequent booking changes and a roster bloated with aging stars. Sid's Millennium Man, while initially receiving a solid push, became another casualty of the company's chaotic direction. His attempts to build Goldberg-like momentum felt derivative rather than innovative, especially with Goldberg still competing in the same company. Despite these challenges, Sid captured the WCW World Heavyweight Championship twice in 2000. These achievements should have represented his career's culmination, validation across multiple companies and eras. Instead, they became footnotes in wrestling history, remembered more for occurring during WCW's death spiral than for memorable storylines or matches. Even as the championship was placed around his waist, television viewership continued to decline precipitously. By 2000, WCW was hemorrhaging money and viewers. The once mighty wrestling powerhouse that had dominated Monday night ratings for 83 consecutive weeks was making desperate creative decisions in failed attempts to recapture glory. Sid's championships came during this tumultuous period, with titles changing hands frequently and storylines abandoned before developing meaningful conclusions. This disconnect between achievement and legacy reveals a fundamental truth about professional wrestling. Championships alone don't determine a performer's historical place. Context matters. The storylines surrounding championships, quality of opponents, cultural impact of the era, and memories created during those reigns all contribute to how a wrestler is ultimately remembered. Sid's championship moments consistently suffered from unfortunate context. His first WWF title came as the company transitioned away from cartoonish characters but hadn't yet embraced the edgier Attitude Era. His second reign was bookended by the Lost Smile controversy and Undertaker's WrestleMania victory, both overshadowing Sid himself. His WCW championships came when that company's creative reputation had deteriorated to where title changes felt meaningless to viewers. Perhaps most crucially, Sid never had the definitive championship feud that defines legendary reigns. There's no Sid equivalent to Hogan versus Andre, Flair versus Steamboat, or Rock versus Austin. No program that fans immediately associate with his time as champion. His reigns were transitional, bridges between more memorable eras rather than defining periods themselves. That's not to diminish Sid's accomplishments. In a notoriously difficult business, he reached the pinnacle multiple times, convincingly portraying a dominant champion whose size and intensity made him a believable threat to any opponent. He succeeded in a career that breaks most who attempt it. But the complicated timing of his championship runs helps explain why a man with multiple world titles isn't immediately mentioned among wrestling's all-time greats. While championship timing may have hindered Sid's legacy, nothing would define his wrestling career more permanently than 8 seconds of footage that wrestling broadcasts still refuse to show in its entirety. How could one attempted move transform a 6'9" powerhouse into a cautionary tale that makes even hardened wrestling veterans wince 20 years later? January 14, 2001. WCW's Sin pay-per-view event in Indianapolis. The once mighty wrestling promotion was already on life support, hemorrhaging viewers and money at an alarming rate. But nobody in the Conseco Fieldhouse that night was thinking about corporate balance sheets when Sid Eudy climbed the turnbuckle during a 4-way match for the World Heavyweight Championship. What happened next remains one of pro wrestling's most horrific moments captured on live. Several wrestlers had reportedly advised him against trying aerial maneuvers given his size and weight. At over 300 pounds and approaching his 40s, Sid was neither built nor trained for high-flying tactics. But in the competitive world of wrestling, where performers constantly push boundaries to stand out, caution often takes a backseat to spectacle. The moment unfolded with terrible inevitability. Sid leaped forward to deliver the boot, his massive frame coming down at an awkward angle. The human leg has structural limits, even one belonging to a physical spina like a thunderclap of doom, silencing the crowd instantly. His tibia and fibula snapped, bones protruding through his wrestling boot in a catastrophic compound fracture. The camera caught the horrific moment before WCW production hastily cut away, but the damage was done, both to Sid and to everyone watching. The commentators fell silent, their usual hyperbole abandoned. When they found their voices again, the bombast was gone, replaced with genuine horror and concern. This wasn't scripted drama. This was real human suffering playing out on pay-per-view. Fans who seconds earlier had been cheering wildly now recoiled in shock. Some turned away, others became physically ill. The atmosphere transformed from entertainment to emergency as medical personnel rushed to the ring. The image of Sid's broken leg became permanently seared into the memory of everyone present, a stark reminder of the physical reality behind the theatrical combat. Wrestling injuries are common, but rarely with such visible devastation. This wasn't a hidden injury that could be masked with tape and determination. This was trauma that shattered the illusion of invincibility surrounding these larger-than-life performers and exposed the fragile humanity beneath the carefully constructed personas. For Sid, the physical agony was just the beginning of his ordeal. Rehabilitation required multiple surgeries and the insertion of a metal rod to stabilize his shattered bones. Recovery from such a catastrophic break would stretch not across weeks or months, but years. A devastating prospect for a performer already in the later stages of his career. WCW's response to the injury revealed much about its deteriorating state. In better days, the company might have properly supported an injured star of Sid's caliber throughout recovery. Instead, the promotion, already financially struggling and just months from being purchased by WWE, provided inadequate support during his rehabilitation. The lack of organizational backing becomes more troubling, considering the severity of the injury. A compound fracture required extensive medical intervention, physical therapy, and forced Sid away from any income-generating activities. For a wrestler whose approach to the business was always built on practical financial decisions rather than artistic passion, this organizational abandonment confirmed the industry's view of performers as disposable assets. The timing couldn't have been worse professionally. WCW would be purchased by WWE in March 2001, just 2 months after Sid's injury. Any opportunity for him to leverage his position during the acquisition or transition to WWE programming vanished with his medical condition. While other WCW stars negotiated new contracts or positioned themselves for career advancement, Sid focused simply on learning to walk again. What makes the injury especially poignant is understanding that Sid had always approached wrestling with clear-eyed practicality. Wrestling was employment, not passion. Yet this job now left him with a potentially career-ending injury and medical expenses at the precise moment his employer disintegrated around him. The man who prioritized business decisions over wrestling passion faced the harsh reality that the business offered little loyalty in return. The legacy of this injury extends beyond Sid himself. The footage has become notorious, shown in edited form or described rather than displayed in full-on retrospectives. For an industry that regularly showcases theatrical violence, the genuine nature of Sid's injury proved too disturbing even for wrestling's theatrical standards. For younger wrestlers, Sid's injury serves as a sobering reminder of the physical risks inherent in the profession, particularly when attempting moves outside one's established repertoire. Wrestling schools reference the incident as a warning about respecting physical limitations and the consequences of overreaching. Despite the catastrophic nature of the injury, Sid remarkably returned to the ring years later. Though never again as a full-time performer, these limited appearances demonstrated both his physical resilience and continued appeal as a recognizable name from wrestling's past. That he could walk to the ring at all, much less perform, stands as testament to modern medical science and his remarkable determination. Sid's return to the ring after his catastrophic leg injury defies medical logic. Most athletes would have hung up their boots permanently after such trauma, but between 2004 and 2017, the imposing figure made several surprising comebacks. Perhaps most memorable was his 2012 appearance on WWE Raw, where, at 52 years old, he defeated Heath Slater with his trademark powerbomb. The crowd's thunderous reaction proved his character still resonated with fans, even as a nostalgia act. That reaction highlights wrestling's most puzzling contradiction. How can a man who headlined against Hulk Hogan and The Undertaker, who held world championships in both major companies, remain conspicuously absent from the WWE Hall of Fame, while wrestlers with far less impressive resumes receive their rings? The numbers speak volumes. 4 world championships across WWF and WCW. Multiple WrestleMania main events. A career spanning the industry's most profitable and culturally relevant eras. By any measurable standard, Sid's accomplishments warrant wrestling's highest honor. Yet year after year, when WWE announces its Hall of Fame class, his name remains noticeably absent. WWE's Hall of Fame stands as a sanctum of loyalty that Sid's pragmatic approach never penetrated. The company, as keeper of wrestling's official history, rewards those who demonstrated unwavering dedication. Sid's pattern of abrupt departures, leaving WWF for softball, exiting WCW after the scissors incident, and his various contract disputes, contradicts the company's preferred narrative of wrestlers who loved the business above all else. Vince McMahon reportedly never personally warmed to Sid, viewing him as a necessary talent during roster shortages rather than a cornerstone performer. In wrestling, personal relationships often supersede professional accomplishments, with being in the boss's good graces mattering as much as championship victories. The infamous scissors incident with Arn Anderson remains a black mark as well. While WWE has forgiven worse behaviors from other Hall inductees, the company selectively sanitizes which controversial moments it incorporates into its version of wrestling history. This real-world violence represents the kind of brutality WWE distances itself from in the PG era. Sid's transparent admission that wrestling was simply a job creates another barrier. In an industry built on the mythology of wrestlers paying dues and sacrificing everything, his financial prioritization makes him an uncomfortable anomaly. The Hall celebration typically frames inductees as lifelong dreamers who achieved their ultimate goal, not pragmatists who viewed wrestling as their most profitable career option. His promo style presents another complication. While genuinely intimidating at his best, his unintentional comedic moments have become immortalized through YouTube compilations and memes. WWE prefers to induct legends whose legacies they can control, rather than those colored by viral bloopers like his infamous, "I have half the brain that you do" flub. What makes this exclusion particularly striking is how it contrasts with similar performers who received the honor. The Ultimate Warrior, another physically impressive but technically limited performer with a history of walking out, was eventually inducted. Diesel, Kevin Nash, whose WWF Championship reign coincided with historically low business metrics, has his ring. Even Sid's contemporaries with shorter title reigns have been welcomed into the hall. Sid occupies an awkward position in wrestling's historical narrative. His career bridged the character-heavy 1980s and the edgier attitude era that followed. He wasn't quite the cartoon superhero of Hulkamania, nor the nuanced anti-hero that defined the late 1990s. Instead, Sid existed between wrestling's distinct generational identities, making his contribution harder to categorize in WWE's carefully curated mythology. This positioning makes Sid both historically significant and challenging to properly contextualize. He headlined against Hogan as the old guard faded, then later against Undertaker and Michaels as a new era dawned. Yet he's never given primary credit for either period's success. Wrestling documentaries focus on Hogan's twilight and Bret Hart's rise when recapping the early 1990s. In wrestling's reconstructed history, Sid becomes a supporting character in other wrestlers' stories rather than the protagonist of his own. The missing Hall of Fame ring reflects Sid's contradictory legacy. His physical attributes, the intimidating height, imposing physique, natural athleticism, represented everything promoters wanted in a top star. Yet his technical limitations, promo inconsistency, and business-first approach prevented him from becoming the definitive face of either major company despite multiple opportunities. This contradiction extends to fan perception. While hardcore wrestling fans may critique his in-ring limitations, casual viewers were consistently impressed by his presence. His powerbomb finisher looked devastating, his intense facial expressions conveyed menace, and his physical stature made victories over legendary opponents believable. The sustained crowd reactions throughout his career confirm that whatever Sid lacked in technical proficiency, he compensated for with undeniable charisma and presence. Perhaps the most fitting summary of Sid's career comes from understanding the unique space he occupied in wrestling history. He was neither the most technically gifted nor the most creatively invested performer, but few could match his physical presence or natural intimidation factor. His pragmatic approach likely preserved his financial and physical health better than many contemporaries who loved the business to their detriment. While wrestling glorifies those who sacrifice everything for the business, Sid Eudy's career reveals a different path. He openly treated wrestling as just a paycheck, yet walked away with his health and finances intact when many legends ended up broken and broke. The industry preaches passion and dedication, but Sid skipped this mythology. He showed up, got paid, and left when better opportunities arose. Ironically, promoters who publicly demanded loyalty couldn't resist throwing money at his imposing 6 feet 9 inches frame and natural intimidation factor. Sid bypassed wrestling's traditional dues-paying process. While others destroyed their bodies for $50 in high school gyms, he leveraged his physical presence for immediate six-figure contracts, making decisions based purely on financial gain rather than creative fulfillment. His most powerful negotiation tool wasn't his physique, but his genuine willingness to walk away, even for personal interests like softball. This shifted the power balance. Promoters knew his threats to leave were real because he'd proven it multiple times. In the end, Sid exposed wrestling's fundamental contradiction by treating it exactly as the business it is, not as the all-consuming passion its mythology demands. A philosophy he maintained until his death from cancer on August 26, 2024, at the age of 63. Check out our video on Big Van Vader. Like and subscribe for 100 years of luck. Until next time.